We thought we were rescuing a dying puppy, but when we cut open his collar, we realized he wasn't lost. He was sent, and what he was carrying was the only reason we made it out alive. This happened years ago. I don't talk about it much. Most of the things that happened over there, you learn to leave behind. But this one stayed. Because no matter how many times I try to explain it, it still doesn't make sense. Not completely. We've been stuck in that trench for almost 18 hours. No orders. No resupply. Radio barely holding a signal. At some point, you stop feeling like a unit and start feeling like you've been forgotten. Lars sat across from me, back against the dirt wall, rifle resting across his knees. He hadn't said much in a while. That wasn't like him. You still got comms? I asked. He picked up the radio, tapped it twice, listened. Static. Then nothing. He shook his head. Dead. I exhaled slowly. That was it then. No updates. No extraction. No plan. Just a trench that was getting hit closer every hour. After a while, Lars muttered something under his breath. What? I asked. He glanced toward the open field ahead of us. This isn't a position anymore. I knew exactly what he meant. That trench, the one we were supposed to hold, wasn't cover anymore. It was a waiting room, and we all knew what we were waiting for. Then we heard it. Soft. Faint. A sound that didn't belong out there. A whimper. At first, I ignored it. Out there, everything made noise. Wind, debris, distant echoes. Your brain starts playing tricks on you. But then it came again. Weak. Shaky. Alive. Lars looked at me. You hear that? I nodded. Neither of us moved. Because acknowledging it meant one thing. Someone had to leave the trench. And leaving without orders was a risk you didn't take lightly. The sound came again. Closer. More desperate. Lars tightened his grip on his rifle. Probably nothing, he said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. I looked toward the collapsed section of trench about 10 meters out. That's where it was coming from, buried under debris, smoke still drifting off it. I didn't think about it too long. Cover me, I said. Lars immediately shook his head. Harry, don't. I'll be quick. He stared at me for a second, then sighed and raised his rifle. Make it fast. The moment I climbed out, everything changed. Inside the trench, you feel protected, even if it's a lie. Out there, you're exposed. Every step felt loud. Every second stretched longer than it should. I moved low, keeping my head down, scanning everything. The ground was damp beneath my boots. The kind of damp you don't think about too much. Because if you do, you stop moving. The whimper came again. Right ahead. I moved faster, dropped to my knees, pulled aside a broken plank, and saw him. A puppy. Small. Filthy. Shaking so hard his whole body barely stayed still. For a second, everything else faded. No gunfire. No war. Just those eyes. Wide. Tired. Looking up at me like he didn't have anything left to give. Hey, easy, I whispered. I reached out slowly. He didn't move. Didn't try to run. Just watched. Like he was waiting. I lifted him gently. He weighed almost nothing. And the moment I pulled him close, something changed. The shaking didn't stop, but it slowed. Like he felt it. Like he knew he wasn't alone anymore. Then, an explosion hit somewhere behind me. Closer this time. Too close. I didn't think. I ran. I dropped back into the trench hard, pulling the puppy in tight against my chest. Lars stared at me. You gotta be kidding me. I ignored him and knelt down, placing the puppy carefully against the trench wall. Up close. He looked worse. Ribs visible. Fur matted with dirt. One ear twitching weakly. But his eyes, they were sharp, watching everything. He tried to stand, collapsed, then dragged himself forward and pressed against my boot. Lars crouched down beside him. He picked you, he said quietly. I didn't answer, but I felt it. That small, quiet connection. The kind you don't question. Then Lars frowned. Wait. He leaned closer. Harry looked. Around the puppy's neck was a collar. Old leather. worn down, cracked, but thicker than it should have been. Hold him, Lars said. I lifted the puppy again, steadying him gently. He didn't resist, just looked up at me. Lars ran his fingers along the collar. Pressed. Paused. There's something inside this. I frowned. What do you mean? He pulled out his knife. Stay still, buddy. He slid the blade under the stitching and started cutting. Slow. Careful. The trench went quiet. Even the distant noise felt like it faded for a second. Then, the thread snapped. Lars peeled the leather back, reached inside, and froze. What? I asked. He didn't respond. Just pulled something out. A folded piece of material. Sealed. Protected. Not just paper. Open it, I said. He did. Slowly. Carefully. And then his expression changed. Completely. Harry, he said quietly. It's a map. It didn't look like anything we were used to. No printed grid. No standard markings. Just hand-drawn lines. Precise. Intentional. We leaned closer. And the more we looked, the more it didn't make sense. These routes, Lars said, they avoid everything. I frowned. That's impossible. He pointed again. No, look. And then I saw it. The paths weren't random. They were calculated. Every turn, every bend, avoided areas we knew were being watched. Patrol routes, drone paths, sans zone. This isn't guesswork, I said. Lars shook his head. No. Then he looked at the puppy. Someone sent this. That's when it hit me. This dog wasn't lost. He didn't wander here. He came here for a reason. I looked down at him. He wasn't shaking anymore, just watching us. Quiet, focused, like he'd done his part. We can't stay here, Lars said. I nodded, because now it was clear. We weren't holding a position anymore. We were sitting in a trap. No comms, no support, no plan. And now, we had something better. A way out. We waited until nightfall. Packed light. Checked weapons. And just before we moved, Lars grabbed my arm. You trust this? He asked. I looked down at the puppy, then back at him. More than I trust staying here. He nodded once. All right. We moved. Slow. Quiet. Every step controlled. I kept the puppy inside my jacket, close to my chest. Every now and then, I felt him shift slightly. Still there. Still alive. We followed the map exactly. Every turn. Every pause. At first, nothing. Then, a faint hum. Down, Lars whispered. We dropped instantly. A drone passed overhead. Low. Scanning. I held my breath. Felt the puppy press tighter against me. Seconds stretched. Then it passed. Lars exhaled slowly. We would have walked right into that. I nodded, because we both knew that map just saved us. We kept moving, step by step, and then the puppy growled. Soft. Low. I stopped immediately. What is it? Lars whispered. I crouched and set him down. He took a few steps forward, then froze, staring at the ground. Lars scanned carefully, then saw it. White. A tripwire, barely visible, right where I would have stepped. We moved around it slowly. Lars shook his head. That dog just saved your life. I looked at him. He looked back, and for the first time, his tail moved. Just once. By the time we reached the final point, the sky was starting to lighten. A cluster of rocks. Nothing obvious. This is it, Lars said. I looked around. Doesn't look like anything. Then the puppy jumped from my arms, ran straight to the rocks, started digging. Fussed. We rushed over, pulled the rocks aside, and found it. A hatch. Metal. Hidden perfectly. Lars let out a breath. I don't believe this. We opened it. Cold air rushed up. A ladder leading down. Inside, a tunnel. Old, but intact. And deeper inside, we found something else. A communication unit. Dust covered, but functional. Lars worked it for a minute. Static. Then, a voice. Faint, but real. Identify. We froze. Then Lars grabbed the mic. And for the first time in hours, we weren't alone. Extraction came at first light. Not instantly, but it came because someone, somewhere, was still listening. When the helicopter touched down, the pilot leaned out and shouted, "Move! Now!" We ran. Fast! No Hosetashchen. But just before we reached it, the crew chief yelled, "Leave anything non-essential." I stopped. For half a second, looked down at the puppy. He looked back at me, pressed his head against my chest. That was it. Decision made. I tightened my grip and kept running. Lars glanced at me as we climbed in. "Figured you wouldn't leave him." I shook my head. Not a chance. As we lifted off, everything finally slowed down. The noise, the chaos, the weight. The puppy rested quietly in my arms. No checking, no fear, just calm. Before we left the area, I checked his collar again, carefully, and that's when I saw it. A name, faint, worn into the leather. I wiped the dirt away, looked closer, and my chest tightened because I recognized it. It was a unit, one we'd been told was gone, missing, no survivors. Lars leaned in. They made it out. I shook my head slowly. No, I looked down at the puppy. He did. We never found out exactly what happened to them, but we knew one thing. They sent that dog with their last chance, and somehow he made it through everything. To us. Years later, I still think about that day, about how close we were, about how easily it could have ended differently, and about him, because in a war filled with machines and noise and strategy, it wasn't any of that that saved us. It was a small, starving puppy who carried hope through hell just so someone else could live. If this story meant something to you, hit like. Not for me, for the ones who didn't make it back, and for the ones who carried others home.